Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, a podcast to encourage, educate, and equip you to care for children and youth through adoption, foster, and kinship care. Hosted by an adoptive mom with over 22 years of kinship and adoptive parenting experience. She's on this journey with you. Please welcome Sandra Flach.
Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he brought them out of their distress. He stilled the storm to a whisper, and the waves of the sea were hushed. That is Psalm 107, verses 28 and 29. I'm your host, Sandra Flach. Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, where you will find encouragement, resources, and community. As a mom of 8, 5 through adoption, including 2 young adults diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome, I understand the challenges that come with raising children with trauma and prenatal substance exposure. So I am on this journey with you, and I am here for you. So let's do this together. In fact, I actually have something for you, an important online session I want to tell you about coming up on Tuesday, May 19th. So just a week from this, when this episode airs, Tuesday, May 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, I'm offering an online workshop called Wired Differently. It is a 3-hour workshop for parents, caregivers, and professionals where we'll discover the impact of prenatal exposure to alcohol on the brain and body, unpack the primary, secondary, and tertiary symptoms of FASD, and explore accommodations and strengths-based strategies for supporting children, teens, and young adults who were exposed to alcohol in utero. I offer certificates of completion. So if you are a foster or adoptive parent and you need to keep up your training hours, you'll get a certificate for the 3-hour training. And we also offer CEUs for social workers. So sign up today. Again, it's called Wired Differently. It's a 3-hour session. It is on May 19th, which is a Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And there's a link in the show notes where you could go to sign up. So I hope that you do that. And of course, I love to connect with you in workshops, but as well as in person. And my 2026 schedule, I am booking for the fall. I will be at CAFO, the Christian Alliance for Orphans Summit in Atlanta on September 23rd through 25th. And then I will be in Chicago for the Replanted Conference, October 15th through 17th. But I have room in my calendar for your event. So if you would like to bring me in to do a day of training or speaking on FASD, or if you're having a retreat for foster or adoptive moms, I am here available to come to you for your event. So I hope that you will check that out and check out my email address in the show notes where you can reach out to me directly to see if we can work something out on the calendar. I would love to come to you in the fall, early winter time for an event. Also, we could schedule it for online, but like I said, happy to come to you to do a training. So you can reach out there. If, let's see, so if you're interested in having me come and speak, you can do that. If you come to one of the events that I'm going to be at, please stop by my table and say hi. We can take a selfie, we can chat. I always love to do that. So now let's get to our guest, because as we continue our observance of National Foster Care Awareness Month, I'm excited to bring you a guest who kind of brings together 2 topics near and dear to my heart, one being foster care, the other being FASD, Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder. So today we have with us Dr. Ryan Jolly. She is a Kansas-based psychiatric nurse practitioner and nationally recognized advocate focused on FASD. As the founder of Brain First Family Center, she leads a specialized clinic dedicated to the identification, diagnosis, and treatment of FASD and related neurodevelopment conditions, with a strong commitment to Medicaid access and eliminating long wait lists for vulnerable families. Ryan's advocacy is grounded in both clinical expertise and lived experience as a single foster and adoptive parent to children with FASD and complex brain-based disabilities. Utilizing her role as doctor of nursing practice, she engages in research to advance understanding of brain-based differences, trauma-informed systems of care, and increase recognition of FASD within child welfare and educational systems. Dr. Jolly strives to reimagine systems of care to ensure all individuals are supported to thrive within families and communities rather than being misunderstood, misdiagnosed, or institutionalized. So please welcome Dr. Ryan Jolly. Welcome to the show, Dr. Jolly.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm super excited because you were recently a VIP guest in our Hope for the FASD Journey online support group, and everyone there loved hearing your story and your FASD expertise. And now I'm thrilled that our listeners of the podcast are going to get to hear from you too. So let's start at the beginning, because I know you are, or what I would say is you're the beginning of your adoption and foster care journey. So you're a single foster adoptive parent. What led you to pursue foster care and adoption?
My story is probably like a lot of people. I was in my mid to late 30s and had never, to my knowledge, been pregnant. I was in a relationship, and any single woman in that age group knows if you want a family, you're either moving towards marriage with your current partner or you're wasting each other's time and you need to have a different plan. So that's where I found myself. And I was really blessed. I had a practitioner that laid it out for me. She said, we can spend $30,000 in the next couple of years trying to get you pregnant, but your odds of that are still single digits, even with that. Or you can reconsider what family looks like to you. And I had been a kinship placement already and knew that my kids didn't have to come from me to be mine in my heart. And kind of as I'm going through all of that, ended up reading an article. I quote it as Vanity Fair, but I can't actually remember, that said, if you're 8 years old and in foster care, you are unadoptable, is the word they used. The point they were trying to make is that you would be adopted by your foster parents or you would age out of the system. But the word unadoptable hit me like a brick to the chest, that an 8-year-old would not get to have a family. And so, like most people, thought about it for a long time, picked up the phone one day, and divine intervention, the foster care classes were starting the next week. And so I was in foster care classes the very next week. So that's what led me to foster and ultimately adoption.
Yeah. And you mentioned you were already doing kinship, because we did a kinship as well. So anything you can share with us about that?
Yeah, it was unofficial kinship. My biological brother and his wife had divorced, and each of them separately in the divorce came to me and my mom and said, we're going to need help with this. Can you help us? And so the time ended up being about a 3-way split. So I was kind of co-parenting with my brother and his ex-wife, and my mom was in the mix as well. So it worked out. We have 2 great kids from that situation. When I present on FASD or my foster care journey, I always tell people those kids refer to themselves as the guinea pigs. They were the first 2. But we made it work as a family. We were lucky because we had the ability to make it work as a family. Not every family is as lucky as we were. And kids end up in care for all sorts of reasons. But my guys were able to be cared for within the family system.
I love that for sure. Now, are you still fostering, or did you foster to adopt?
I am adoptive of 3 kids that started as foster placements in my home. My youngest is in foster care and will remain in care for the rest of his life. His medical needs are so extensive that only the state can manage his medical needs, and he needs the weight of the state as his parent. When we have issues with medications or we have issues with procedures or whatever care he needs, our doctors get to advocate for him and close the argument by saying, and by the way, the state is his parent. So maybe just give him what he needs and not get the big state involved. And so that's a power that an adoptive parent doesn't have.
Yeah.
But he'll be with us for life. His expectation when he came to us, he was assaulted in his birth home and left with a traumatic brain injury, quadriplegia. Every body system is impaired, fully dependent in every way. He was expected to survive 6 to 8 weeks at most, and he's been with us 7.5 years.
Wow.
So he'll be with us for his lifetime.
Yeah, that's incredible. Incredible, the work that you're doing there. And yeah, I would say in foster care on paper, but really in your family permanently. Yeah.
To the point that the state is covering modifications to our home to allow him to continue to grow in our home.
Wow.
So we're pretty confident that as long as I am capable of caring for him, he'll be with us.
Wonderful. Wonderful news there. So you said, how many have you adopted? 4?
I've adopted 4.
4. Wow. So tell us about the children that you adopted and kind of a little bit of a story on how they joined your family.
Sure. I had a couple of placements where I thought they were my forever kids, and the state had a different view and went to war for some of those placements to the point of bringing a motion suing the state for not doing their job by those children. And it was after that, fought with everything I had, because you have to fight with everything you have, even knowing that it's a losing battle. We lost. I lost. And I would like to say I think they lost too. After that, I took a moment to kind of think about what I wanted. And my prayer to the universe, my request to the universe had always been, I really want to be a mom. I have a heart to be a mom. I want to be a mom. And as I worked through the grief of losing those children, I changed my prayer to, please let the children that need me to be their mom find their way to my home. Let the children that can't have any other mom but me find their way to my home. And my first daughter came. She's also medically complex. She has a 1 in 98 million chromosomal abnormality. She has cerebral palsy, trach dependency, nonverbal, she's 14 years old, but developmentally probably closer to a preschooler in her cognition. And she came with the intention of going home to her parents, to the point that we'd had so much heartache in our home that we would refer to her by her first name. Her middle name was who is going home to her parents, last name, in the attempt not to get attached. But you fell in love with her on the first day. Her nickname in our home is Lovey, because all she wants to do is snuggle and love. And so I was caring for her when I got an opportunity to bring in a set of siblings. There were 3 kids in the sibling set. They had been placed in different homes. The hope was to reunify them in a home that was willing to adopt. And so one by one, 2 of those kids came to my home. Eventually they would be split, and the oldest sister would be adopted by another family because that was the best circumstance for her. And these were going to be my average kids. These were going to be the non-medical, non-complex, straightforward kids. They'd been through a lot. My son came to me at 3 years old, and I'm mommy number 6 for him. And my daughter came to me at 4, and I'm at least mommy number 8. And I say at least because she was in care in another state where we are going to generously refer to their record keeping as spotty. So we don't know how many placements she had in the other state. But what we were told was it's abuse and it's trauma. Or excuse me, it's trauma and it's attachment. It's attachment because of the trauma. It's trauma because of the attachment. How could you not have trauma if you've had 8 parents by the time you're 4, et cetera, et cetera. But being a TBRI informed foster parent, I can handle trauma and I can handle neglect. We can do all of those things. And so off we went to therapy, to group therapy, to individual therapy, to family therapy. I got a therapist. If we weren't in a social skills class, we were meeting the families from the social skills class at a McDonald's, practicing our social skills to try and bring it together. But we still had conflict. We still had everyday headbutting. We still had, what do you mean you can't tie your shoes today? You could do it for the last 2 days, but you can't do it today. And my spidey sense told me there's something else here that that this isn't it, that the attachment and the trauma and the neglect, they're all part of it, but there's something else going on here. And as the humor of the universe would have it, I needed to renew my foster care license, and the only session available where I had childcare was this woman from Minnesota, this blonde lady with a Minnesota accent, talking about FASD, and that was Barb Clark. And I very rarely in life do you become friends with a person that changed your life in an hour. Because I sat down, and I tell people all the time, she should have started her presentation with, "Thank you for coming, Ryan. We're here to talk about your children." Because as she began to discuss FASD and what an FASD profile might look like and all of those things, it was the clouds parted and the sun shone down. I had an answer for why we were struggling. And so that led us on our FASD journey.
Yeah. So it makes me, want to ask you, what does an FASD profile look like for our listeners who might not, like you in the beginning, not realize like what is going on here? Because it's more than just attachment and trauma. What does an FASD profile look like?
I would love to tell you that it's A, B, C, and D. And if we've got A, B, C, and D, then it's maybe FASD. The challenge with FASD is that it looks different in every individual. If you've met one person with FASD, you've met one person because their presentation is different. In my kids, what it looked like was my two kids share a biological mother, different biological fathers. So our base material is similar but different. Likely had very similar exposure experiences, but their manifestation of FASD could not be more different. My son is a traditional boy with explosive, loud behaviors. My daughter is executive function impairment. So for her, it looked like willful disobedience.
Yep.
Because she could give you chapter and verse on the house rules. She could explain the consequence if she broke the rule. And 3 seconds later, off she went to break the rule. Could not get out of her own way. That impulsivity, she's 15 now, and that impulsivity continues. And I used to think that it was that old Tom and Jerry cartoon where the devil and the angel are on each shoulder and they're battling it out. When impulsivity is driving the bus for her, there is no angel. It's just the impulse to do the thing and won't stop until that impulse is met. So for her, executive function impairment is where it all lives. For him, it lives in also executive function, but in emotional regulation. He is, to this day, still explosive. He's 14 and will, when dysregulated, will run in place and flap his arms like a toddler would when they're unhappy. Both of them academically excel. They're both on par with their group. Neither have motor concerns of significant nature. My son, I'm trying to think about how to explain this without going through all of the brain domains that we would look at for impairment in FASD. My son really struggles in what I kind of call the evil triad. So there are 3 parts of FASD assessment that are thought to be different parts of the brain that have to do with socialization, how we work in community with others. That has to do with language, affect regulation. Does your emotional state match your face? Can you read someone else's emotional state from verbal and nonverbal cues? And then social and adaptive communication. Do you know how to get along in a group? And my son struggles in those areas. He cannot read a room to save his ever-loving life. And on the rare occasion that he can, on the rare occasion that he is even cognizant that maybe he needs to read the room, 50% of the time he's going to get it wrong.
Yeah.
Because those observed skills that we all pick up from being in community with others, seeing how others behave, replicating that behavior, there's just that part of his brain doesn't work properly. So in an FASD assessment, depending on what your discipline is, what the practitioner is trained in, whether they're in medical MD, DO, NP, they're a psychologist, they're a speech language pathologist. We're all going to call it different things, and we're probably going to number the brain areas or the brain domains differently, but there's somewhere between 8 and 10. And they're all roughly the same. Different areas of quantifiable differences, quantifiable impairments, where we can say for an individual at this age, the expectation is here, and the individual that we're assessing is either below or above that.
Wow. I agree, because I have two boys that we adopted. They're biological siblings, same mother, same father, same diagnosis. They both have an FAS, fetal alcohol syndrome diagnosis. And while there's a lot of similarities in their symptoms, they present differently. One has an average IQ, one has a below average IQ. One did also get the below average IQ, got the intellectual disability diagnosis when he was a teenager. Just a lot of, one can drive, the other one can't drive, right? So there's just a lot of, it does present differently, even in biological siblings. Twins, I know of people who've adopted twins, both prenatally exposed, and even in the twins, it presents differently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when I present on neurodiversity and brain development, I talk a lot about how many opportunities there are in a traditionally developed brain for everything to go right, and how billions and billions of different things have to go right for this brain that's supposed to develop here to do this. And any one thing that is slightly off, DNA that doesn't quite copy correctly, epigenetics where a gene on-off switch gets switched on at the wrong time, exposure to substances, teratogens, alcohol, can take this development and, like a pinball, knock it onto a completely different course. Mm-hmm. And so we see that in the twin studies, where for whatever reason, when the teratogen was exposed, one went this way and the other went this way. Wow. And so it's amazing that it ever goes right. Goes right is incorrect. That's not the proper word. That traditional development ever happens, because there are literally billions, if not trillions, of opportunities in that short 40 weeks for all of it to go in a completely different direction.
Yeah. And I find that fascinating. I've done a lot of interviews with Dr. Jared Brown. I don't know if you're familiar with Brown, but, I've done dozens of interviews with him. And sometimes when I'm all done with the interview, I think to myself, it's pretty miraculous that anybody gets out of the womb safely, right? With all of the things that, like you said, have to go right. And one little thing going wrong, changes the trajectory there.
Well, and the part that we don't always want to acknowledge is that in that miracle is a lot of vulnerability.
Yeah.
That we tend to think of childbirth as this natural process where women have been doing it for as long as there have been humans and everything works out fine. It's one of the most vulnerable times in a woman's life, where stress and nutrition and sleep and the air we breathe and the food we eat and the DNA contribution from everybody all play a role. And that developing fetus is very, very vulnerable to all sorts of things.
So eye-opening. I want to get deeper in our conversation about FASD, but before we do, a couple of things. As a parent and as a professional, because you were already a professional seeing patients and doing all those things before you were aware of FASD and adopted your kids?
Yes and no. I was a master's prepared nurse when my kids came to my home. So I was working in the medical field. And again, as fate, the universe would have it, in January of 2020, I was headed to a PhD program at Johns Hopkins. I was completing my admission there because I was going to, from an academic standpoint, I was going to try to make FASD a more well-known condition. I don't know how I thought I was going to do it in an administrative kind of position, but I was going to bring FASD out of the dark and into the light. And then again, the universe laughs when you have plans. COVID hit. And I've got 4 really complex kids, and trips to Baltimore were not in the cards for me. And so I kind of took a step back and kind of surveyed the landscape with peers in the FASD community. Where do my unique talents lend themselves? And I decided to be an NP, a nurse practitioner focused on FASD. So I focused on psychology or psychiatry as my specialty, and that's how I ended up here, is that path.
Well, and we're grateful that you did, because you're definitely such a important voice, and an asset to the FASD community, certainly. But so now you're the professional. Well, you've always been a professional, but focusing on FASD, and a parent. What has surprised you most, Ryan, about FASD? Living on a daily basis with your kiddos.
A couple of things. Probably first and foremost is the mental load, the mental and emotional load of being the external hard drive, the external executive function for other people. It's easier when they're little. It gets harder as they get older because of some of the expectations of, well, you're 14 now, you're 15, you should be able to. If I could tell a parent with raising a child with FASD to lose one word, it would be should.
Good.
Just cut that completely out of your vocabulary, because it doesn't help anybody. It doesn't do any good. And kind of along the lines of that, in raising kids with FASD and some big challenges, often the focus is on the things that happened, what the school trouble is, what the daycare trouble is, what the fussing, the fighting, the arguing at home, those conflicts. But as I've been at this a while now, I think the bigger thing is what doesn't happen. What should be, again, here I am with should, what you expect to happen that doesn't. We don't really go on vacation much. We don't, my kids don't have sleepovers. They don't get invited to sleepovers. They don't want kids coming to our home. Eventually you don't get invited to the birthday parties and all of those things. Just an example, a couple weeks ago, a relative got a promotion, and one of my big kids got a promotion, and it comes with a company car, and he's going to sell his car because he's getting this company car instead. And my first thought was, oh, my daughter is 15. She's going to drive soon. I should buy the car from him and have it so she can drive. She's not going to drive soon, despite being 15. She's not going to drive soon. I don't know if or when her focus will be enough for her to be safe on the road with a driver. And no matter how much you intellectually understand that and how you've mapped out your children, and you chapter and verse, their strengths and their weaknesses, those moments of, oh, my traditional mindset says this normal thing, this age appropriate thing should be happening for my kid, is still a punch in the face, no matter how long you've been doing it. So those are kind of the big things that are on my mind at the moment.
Yeah. And I can relate to that. My youngest two who have FAS are 20 and 22. By this fall, they'll be 21 and 23. And one drives, has a job, is doing pretty well. He's the one that's going to be 23, but still needs, he lives interdependently. So he lives in an apartment attached to our garage, but there's still certain things he needs. And then our younger son, who's going to be 21, just same thing. I don't know when the driving will happen. Will it happen? Will he live independently? So those are some of the things, like, I think when we first set out to adopt, especially, we understand when we take a medically fragile child like you have, going in, this is a long-term commitment. But when you don't realize the FASD, or you don't realize that, they're not going to just turn 18, graduate high school, go to college, and live happily ever after, and we're going to have an empty nest, right? So when we adopted many, many years ago, we didn't know that. And I don't have any regrets. I want to make sure I say that, but life is different. My husband's retired. I get to do what I do, but a lot of times our youngest son, we do everything. It was just our anniversary recently. And my daughter-in-law said, "Oh, what are you guys doing? Are you going to go out to dinner?" Or what are you doing for your anniversary? And I said, "Oh, we're going to go out to dinner." And they're like, "Well, what are you going to do with, your son?" And I said, with Slava. And I said, "Well, he'll probably go with us because he goes with us everywhere." But my daughter-in-law was the one who asked, and she was very sweet. And she said, "Well, he can hang out with us. Like he went, and they took him out to dinner. They went someplace else and did something so we could go out to dinner." But it's very different. If we want to go on vacation, he's coming with us. It's just different. Not bad, but different. But it is definitely a long term. They don't ever outgrow FASD, right? So.
And as parents, excuse me, I think that we all have this idea of parenting where when they're little, you're the shift supervisor and you're right with them all of the time. And
Yep.
then as they develop and they mature, you graduate to kind of the foreman. You're in charge of the bigger picture. And eventually you're going to graduate to the executive suite where you just kind of oversee everything and you're there in case there's a problem. With FASD, for a lot of individuals with FASD, we as parents never step out of that line supervisor role, that shift supervisor that need attention. My kids are with FASD are 14 and 15 and still require eyes on attention.
Yes.
So it's not go to the other room and watch TV or go play on your tablet or any of those sorts of things. It's still toddler level supervision because if the impulse hits, we're off to the races.
Yeah, especially with the technology. My 20, almost 21-year-old is across the room from me on the iPad, but because he has to be in my vicinity while he's doing that, and doesn't get left home alone. And I think that some of the roles that I now fill are I'm job coach, I'm life skills coach, right? So there's so many things that, we're, not just the what did you call it? The first level of
the supervisor, the shift supervisor.
The shift supervisor. I'm the shift supervisor, the job coach, all of the things, right? The nutrition coach, all of the things. So but with no regrets, but it's a lot. We do a lot.
It is. I often tell families, and I have to remind myself sometimes, we're as caregivers, we're in the middle of the only life we're ever going to have too.
Yes.
As we want to help and support, we love our children. We wouldn't have it any other way. We would step in front of the moving bus to protect our child. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah. And worth it.
110%.
Sandra Flach, host of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, and FASD educator Debbie Raymond, invite you to join Hope for the FASD Journey, a virtual support community for parents and caregivers raising individuals with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, diagnosed or not. This faith-based support community meets online 3 times each month, features special VIP guests, and a private Facebook group for members only, which includes Soul Care Saturday video devotionals led by Sandra and Deb. Both Sandra and Deb are adoptive moms raising kids with FASD and facilitators of the Facets neurobehavioral model. For details and to register, visit justicefororphans.ny.org/hope-community. That's justicefororphans.ny.org/hope-community.
So Ryan, you founded the Brain First Family Center. Tell us about the work that you do now.
So the work that I do at Brain First Family Center, and I use the imperial we at the moment, it's me and a part-time admin, but I have grand plans for what I would like it to be. In my decision to become a nurse practitioner, I did that for a couple of reasons. One, as a foster and adoptive parent, my kids have Medicaid. All of the kids that came to my home in foster care have Medicaid. And in our area, like many areas around the country, finding a mental health provider that will accept Medicaid and doesn't have a 6 to 9 to 12 month wait for services is really uncommon. So I really built the clinic to be what I needed, but couldn't find in my area. So first and foremost, we're a support for foster and adoptive families and individuals throughout our state looking for FASD evaluation, information, support, all of those things. On the rare occasion that some of our local providers will diagnose FASD, there's not a lot of ongoing support. There's not a lot that will then take on medication management or offer therapy or offer caregiver support. That's another big thing that we offer. As a mom of medically complex children, I went to a psychiatrist once that told me I needed to reduce stress in my life. And I looked the man dead in the face and asked him which of my children I should abandon. Because to reduce the stress in my life meant I would have to abandon one or more of my children. To my mind, that's not helpful advice.
That's right.
That's not what I'm coming to you for, sir. And so we offer caregiver supports as well. We do ongoing counseling, medication management when appropriate for caregivers. Because when you walk through life helping other people with their trauma, someone's going to splash on you too. Mm-hmm. And you need a different kind of mental health provider that understands walking away from this job you volunteered for isn't one of the options.
So true. So good. I'm so glad that you're doing that, because when my boys they were diagnosed when they were 6 and 8 by a developmental pediatrician, and they had the facial features. We had, birth records that indicated the parents, they were adopted internationally. So the translated, basically they abused alcoholic drinks, air quotes, right, was how it translated. But so there was enough to where it was easy to get the diagnosis. But they got diagnosed with FAS, fetal alcohol syndrome, and ADHD, very common, right? And we were handed a pamphlet on ADHD and said, you might want to focus on life skills. Have a nice day. There was nothing. And so, I did what most of us would do is I got home and I went on the internet to, search fetal alcohol syndrome. And way back then, what I was finding that the life we had to look forward to was very much doom and gloom, right? It was terrible outcomes. And we were like, no, that's not going to happen to our family. And thankfully, most of that hasn't happened to our family, but still wasn't anything other than we had discovered the TBRI, the trauma-informed stuff, and focused on that, which helped, applying those connecting principles and all of that really did help until they became teenagers. And then it was like, okay, this FAS is something we need to know more about. And by then there was a little bit more out there, but, it isn't easy to get a diagnosis, which we'll talk about in a moment. But even if you get the diagnosis, there's, a lot of places, there's nothing more that's offered. So I'm so grateful to hear that you are doing that at Brain First Family Center. And, so again, I just said families, it's so hard. We suspect our kids may have an FASD, but it's so hard to get that diagnosis. Why is that?
A couple of reasons. I'll start with the comment that you just made. 2 things on that. I think God makes babies cute, so you don't throttle them when they become teenagers. Brain injury or not, I think that's the way this works. You mentioned that your children were internationally adopted. In my experience, children that are internationally adopted have more information in their records about alcohol exposure, even in countries or even from countries where FASD is not recognized or diagnosed easily, still tend to have more information in their records. And so without that little bit of information in your kids' records and the presence of facial features, your journey to a diagnosis may have been completely different. And I'm sorry, I forgot your question.
Oh, just why is it hard to get a diagnosis for the average, family?
So for the average family, there are lots of reasons that that's hard. One, probably first and foremost, is stigma. For birth moms, there's a lot of pressure on moms to have done all of the right things. And if their child is born with something that's not quite that average development, mom must have done something wrong. And so there's a lot of stigma. A lot of kids end up with a backpack full of diagnoses before they ever get FASD as an even a consideration. So for a lot of families, it's easier to say, okay, well, ADHD is it, and off we go for ADHD, not digging deeper to see if there's something else there. The other issue, there are about 150 issues that will answer your question. But the other one that I think is prominent is in medical training, we're not taught about FASD. Right. We're not taught about FASD as a spectrum of multiple presentations. We're not taught anything other than FAS. So if I piled up all the textbooks I had to read to get to be a nurse practitioner, taking out the DSM-5 that does a little bit better, and the DSM-5 is a diagnostic manual for mental health. If we take that out, and they only do like a fraction better than the other textbooks, all of my textbooks would be at about my shoulder, so about 5 feet tall. FAS warranted 4 paragraphs in all of those textbooks, and all of them were about facial features. It was about identifying facial features, not anything about what's next. Yeah. Once we've identified the features, what do we do next? How do we help? How do we encourage? How do we support? None of that. So lack of education is certainly an issue. In addition to that lack of education, practitioners are disincentivized after they finish their education to become involved in FASD, to educate themselves, to have an understanding, because of money. Because FASD is not, the time it takes to do an FASD diagnosis is not fully compensated in our insurance billing codes. And so I could spend 2 hours with a family trying to figure out what we've got going through all the brain domains, doing a complete assessment, and charge one price. Or in that same 2-hour period, I can see 6 patients and bill 6 times at that one price. So I'm disincentivized as a capitalist for-profit healthcare system to step out and take the time it takes to actually do an assessment. And that's why probably we see most of our diagnostic clinics associated with academic institutions and providing assessments through grant funding, through programming that way. And so that's not great, you know. And probably the third most important is the support network. Once I give you, very much like you were told, here's the diagnosis and good luck. To be a practitioner, to be the person that's credentialed to do the diagnosis, means you did really well in school, through a lot of school. You're used to having the right answer. You're used to knowing what it is and being able to say, that's it, or find it, and that's it. So you're used to being right, and you don't want to be wrong. You don't want to put yourself out on the limb and say, I think it's this, but I don't know. And providers are human too. If you know about FASD, if as your developmental pediatrician knew about it, worse than saying, I don't know, is saying, I know exactly what that is, but I've got nothing for you.
Right, which is what happened.
Go with God. And so it's kind of the snake that eats its own tail. It just kind of goes round and round and round. So I just came back from the international conference in Seattle, which was wonderful, and speaking on a panel. And insurance is going to be the key for us to make this a commercial model, make this something that we can keep up with the demand. There's a study or a paper from Popova et al., and I want to say it was published in 2024, that talks about the need for a commercially viable diagnostic model that is a single clinic visit is the only way we're going to get to meeting the demand. I believe in their study, they said we would require something like 800 diagnoses a day in order to keep up with our demand for FASD diagnosis. And that's assuming that you're only screening the people that are going to be diagnosed. That's not even assuming that some people aren't going to screen in. And I don't know that all of the diagnostic clinics in the country can do 800 a day.
Right.
If you combined us all. So there are lots and lots of challenges. But it's worth the fight. It'll be the work I do for the rest of my life. I'm hoping to bring some people along behind because I'm no spring chicken, but hoping to make a dent in this challenge. I was talking with someone at that conference, and sometimes when you tell people that FASD affects 1 in 20 Americans, they look at you like you're insane. Well, I know like 200 people, and I don't know anybody with FASD. And the reality is that everybody interacts with somebody with FASD on a regular basis. The only difference is you either know or you don't know. Right. Because we're interacting with people with FASD all of the time. So then when especially with legislators, when you go and try and talk to them about what we need in our individual states or in our country, you get kind of that glassy stare, like, okay, they've gone into the tinfoil hat arena and we don't have to listen to them anymore. But then you start describing what that might look like, what that might be in real life. And everybody ends up with a cousin or a best friend or a kid from high school who cannot get out of their own way to save their life. Yeah. That 6 choices, 5 of them are good choices and one's a bad choice. They're going to pick that bad choice every single time. When you start laying out what it might look like, people start putting the pieces together.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've done training, FASD training for parents. And I've had, moms come up to me and say, I think I have this. Right. And one mom is in her 60s and she was like, I remember my mom, back then, back in the 50s and 60s, it was just customary to have a cocktail. What was the recommendation? One alcoholic beverage, no more than one alcoholic beverage per day for a pregnant woman, right? So we all know lots of people who were prenatally exposed and yeah, it's I don't know if you can call it the best kept secret, but it's right under our nose and we don't even know.
The presentation I gave at Seattle was about FASD and foster care, and our title was Hidden in Plain Sight.
Yes.
FASD is hidden in plain sight. We're all interacting with individuals with FASD, and it's a challenge. So in what little, air quotes, free time I have, I'm working at the state level trying to change the way we understand disability in our state, because all of my children have disabilities, with an emphasis on FASD and kind of chipping away at it a little bit at a time.
Yeah. And I know you're in Kansas and,
yes.
and I'm in New York, and we're trying to chip away at it here. And I'm not a medical practitioner like you are, but, just had a table at the New York State Mental Health Counselors Association's annual, it's every 2 years conference. And so it was all mental health clinicians from around the state and college students ready to graduate in May as, to become clinicians. So we would ask as they would come by our table, are you familiar with FASD? And they're usually like, no. And then we're like, well, fetal alcohol. Oh yeah. Well, a little bit, and it would be like, well, affects 1 in 20 people in the United States. And then there's the other stat that is like, it's the leading cause of birth defects and developmental and learning disabilities worldwide. And that just blows their mind. Right. And, so I had such great conversations and actually I walked away with, I'll be doing a presentation in front of a college class in October now, in the fall, because there was a little group of college students that came by and they were fascinated because they were like, we didn't learn this in college, and they're ready to graduate. So the one girl went and got her professor and brought her professor back, and I had a wonderful conversation with her, and she was the one. She's like, let's take our calendars out. I want you to come and speak to my next class next year on this. So, so much work to do to bring awareness. So thank you for what you are doing. I also wanted to ask you, Ryan, because you do diagnose at your clinic.
Yes.
So tell us what that process is like. What do you do?
So, because it can't be easy and be a standardized diagnostic model, there are different ones being used in different clinics around the country, around the world. The model I use is the 4-digit code out of the University of Washington. And so it's about 20 some odd years old, recently modified in 2024. And we look at 10 brain domains when we do a diagnosis. So we do a 3-visit model. A family comes in, and my session always starts with, what brings you here?
Mm-hmm.
What's going on that we need to sit down and talk about it? And oftentimes that's parents, kid comes for a little bit, but we encourage them to bring another person. So when we talk about the hard things, we can have a private conversation about that with the parents. And I send families away from that with a screener called the Vineland 3. It's adaptive social skills. Kind of what's your day look like? What is your child capable of doing in their daily life? Send one of those home for the parents and one home for a teacher or a trusted adult. And I always encourage parents when they're doing their screeners to take it a page at a time, because it can be traumatizing. Thinking back, we all know what our kids' strengths and their weaknesses are, but when you have to look at a list of them and rate your child on a list of strengths and weaknesses, it can get a bit demoralizing. And it can trigger past traumas when we're talking about, did they meet their milestones? We don't ever think about, they met this one, and this one. We always think about, well, they missed this one and this one and this one. And so when it comes to the teacher screener, I always ask the parents to have a trusted adult that has an objective view of their child to do that screener. We want our kids to have a safe place at school where they are loved and they are supported, and that one teacher that just adores them and thinks the sun shines from their bum. That is great, but not always the most objective information for somebody like me. Mm-hmm. So that's our first visit. Our second visit is a one-on-one interview with the kiddo. And we'll go through a series of tests, air quotes on tests, presented as games. We'll look at motor skills. I'll observe gait. We'll do a Romberg test to check proprioception. We'll do motor skills testing. We'll do memory testing, kind of all of those things. And then I go away. And I didn't say in that first visit, I give the parents a list of documentation that I need. And that documentation is extensive. It's every doctor's report that you can get your hands on, every school testing, every IEP, every international adoption document that you can get for me. And in between the second and the third visit, I go through every piece of paper looking for clues that might tell us that, yes, this is an FASD, or the brain domain that I'm observing has impairment, but it's more attributable to something else in their medical history, et cetera, et cetera. And that can take me weeks and weeks to do, because sometimes I need to sit with it for a minute. I need to take in the information and I need to sit with it. It's never the diagnosis. The diagnosis is pretty clear, but I need to sit with how to phrase it, how to write my report in a way that shares the real picture with the family, but offers them hope and encouragement at the same time. The last thing I want to do is give my families a list of their kids' worst, greatest hits, and send them into the world with that. So we do a lot of work on emphasizing strengths, emphasizing the parents' dedication to their child. It takes a lot of love and dedication to your kid to show up in an office like mine. It takes a lot, especially if you're a birth mom. It takes a lot. And so that third visit is going over the report, where we go line by line and domain by domain. And I saw impairment here as evidenced by all of these things, or no, there is some weirdness in this. I don't use the word weirdness, but there's some weirdness in this brain domain, but I don't think it reaches the definition or the extent to qualify for impairment in that brain domain. And then we offer, as part of our report, it's actually 2 reports together. Our second report is only recommendations. It gives the diagnoses that have been given, any other diagnoses that the individual has, and then about 5 pages of recommendations that covers everything from daily living to school to healthcare to kind of all of the things that might be helpful for you. And we present it that way because not everybody down the road that needs the list of recommendations gets the privilege of knowing the entire story. That's your child's private health information. That's your family's private health information. So we present it that way. So the recommendation section is a standalone piece that can be shared with whomever you want without any information about their history that you might not want out in the world. Right. So we present it that way. And I prepare my report. It's super long, but I prepare it with the expectation I might not see you again. People come to us from out of state. People come to us from, an 8 to 10 hour drive across our state. The intention is that the next provider, whomever that may be, can pick up the report, see what we saw, see what I saw, and understand how we got to that diagnosis.
Wow. So that leads me to two more questions that were on my list to ask you. So it's a good segue in. So I wanted to ask you, once you diagnose, so say you do all of that and then the report indicates, this is FASD. I love what you're providing them with there. But so if they're local to you, because I know you're in Kansas, if they're able to come back to your clinic, do you provide other supports? Because I know you did say you do see parents and also, help them as they process this along. So what else do you do beyond diagnosis?
We do general medication management. We do psychotherapy counseling for both the individual with FASD and the parents or support team for the individual. It's been said many times in many forums, FASD is a diagnosis for an entire family. Yeah. It changes an entire family's dynamic. And I shouldn't say changes it acknowledges a family's dynamic. Yeah. I think that we're a naming and taming species. And so diagnosis is important. So you understand what's going on. And so we do. We offer supports for anybody in the family. I have one family where we see 3 generations in the same family because the support team for the family needed some help too.
Wow. That is wonderful. So I know our listeners who are listening from all over the country may be thinking, how do I get my kid to your clinic? So you're in Kansas and you did mention something about families coming in from out of state. So what does that look like? How does that work?
So families can come to Kansas. The only requirement we do offer telehealth. So we tend to see families from our adjoining states step over the line and we can do telehealth. My licensure is only in the state of Kansas. We're looking at expanding into other states, but because, again, we can't have a single rule for the country, every state has different rules, and trying to figure out where we can do the most good with the best supports for me as an independent practitioner. Some states have a requirement that a psychiatrist supervise my work. Others allow me to practice independently. And so that's kind of the caveat that my business manager is trying to look at to see where the next place is for us to try to help. But so if it's somebody around the country wants to come to Kansas, we're centrally located. There's lots of fun stuff. Don't come this summer. We've got the World Cup and 650,000 people are going to come for it. So this summer is not the best time, but we can help make arrangements for suggestions for travel and sightseeing. Several families make it their vacation. And this is just, we spend part of a day at the clinic during our vacation.
Wow. So families can come in from out of state, stay a few days and go through that process you described earlier, hopefully get a diagnosis if that's what's needed. And then moving beyond that, they can do telehealth if there's anything else needed. Yeah. That is wonderful. So for a family interested in connecting with you on that type of thing, what is your website? How would somebody get a hold of you?
Our website is in flux at the moment because it's a little clunky. It's Brain First, spelling out the word first, familycenter.com.
Okay. But they can find you there.
They can sure find us there, and email. You can email Ryan at brainfirstfamilycenter.com.
and I'll make sure we put your email also in the show notes along with the website, but your email so that they can directly connect with you if they would like to do that. So one other thing I wanted to ask you about, because you mentioned this in our group when you were a guest in our support group, and I was like, wow, that was news to me. I knew about the 428, comorbidities, the other health conditions that are highly prevalent in people with FASD, vision and hearing problems and congenital malformations, musculoskeletal, all of the things, right? Cardiac, autoimmune. But you said something in the support group that was new, and that was that some health conditions that would typically present in a neurotypical person, later in life, like say high blood pressure or something, actually presents much earlier in a person with FASD. I might have botched it, but could you explain that for us?
Absolutely. So that's based on research by Dr. Amanda, I'm going to butcher her last name, I believe it's Monkey, from the Texas A&M University. She completed a study that she presented a couple years ago at Impact Week with FASD United. And then she was at the international conference as well, and I believe spoke on it. She took a control group of individuals not diagnosed with FASD and looked at diseases of middle age, things like high blood pressure, heart disease, things of that nature. And the average onset in the control group was 54 to 56 years old, kind of those middle age diseases. And then she compared that to a small cohort of individuals with an FASD diagnosis. And the average onset of those diseases was 27 as opposed to 54. And so we know that there are co-occurring disease processes. And the fact that you have an FASD is not a guarantee that you're going to end up with all of those 400 disease processes or any of those 400 disease processes. Right. What Amanda's research is showing us is that in the differential diagnosis, so a differential diagnosis in medicine is you've given me a list of symptoms, and here are all the things I can think of that it could be. It could be any one of these things. And 5, 6, 7, depending on your discipline, you should have at least those clues or those options. And then you start narrowing it down, and you exclude this one and you exclude that one and you take that one off the table. In the differential diagnosis, for all medical diseases, FASD should be in that list, because we know that FASD potentially puts you at a higher risk or means that you could have one of these diseases. So in medicine, there's a phrase that's used all the time, in medical education, I should say. When you hear hooves, think horses, not zebras. And that's a story they say to think about the common thing, not the exotic thing. Because especially in medical education, you read about the exotic thing and then you see it, you think you see it everywhere. And that's telling us to bring it back to the common thing. So it's important that individuals diagnose their FASD to their medical providers, because we want them to be thinking about the exotic thing. Your kid, your loved one might be that zebra. So we need to be telling our medical professionals. That's not to say that the medical professional is going to know what to do with that information, right? But we want it to be in the mix. We want it to be, and I have this, and this means that I could have some weird stuff. So I want you to think about the weird stuff when you're thinking about taking care of me. And weird is not a good word. Exotic is a better one.
Yeah. Well, one of my boys with FAS, when we adopted him, he was 3. His spine was like a corkscrew. He had severe scoliosis, needed all kinds of surgeries over the years. And his orthopedic surgeon specialized in scoliosis, pediatric scoliosis, and he was phenomenal. But looking at this particular son, he was very small, still is. He's the older one, and he's still like 5 foot. If we stretch him out, right, he's 5 foot. He's very small. But other like wonky skeletal stuff going on, and I knew he had the FAS diagnosis, but way back then I didn't know anything about like the 428, I didn't know a whole lot about FASD other than this is the diagnosis. But, I did bring it to the attention of the orthopedic surgeon. He's like, oh, I only know scoliosis and spines. Like, so there's all of these disconnected pieces that nobody's linking together, it seems.
I would agree wholeheartedly. And because nothing with FASD can be straightforward. It's exceptionally complicated because there's never a set problem list.
Right.
As our kids age, as they change, as they gain maturity, as they gain skills, as their body ages, that list of what we've got going is constantly changing. My son, who's 14 with FASD, has some orthopedic issues and has some endocrine issues. We don't know if it's the alcohol exposure. He's half Native American, so the diabetes risk is exceptionally higher in the Native American population. We just don't know. And so again, being forthright with your providers, whether that impacts their decision making, their clinical reasoning or not, better to share. And with all things FASD, the caregiver is probably going to find themselves in the role of educator, educating the professional they're in front of, trying to bring them up to speed on what we all know in the FASD community, but just isn't being disseminated because it's hidden in plain sight.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to me. I know another family who adopted through foster care, and their daughter is a senior in high school and did get an FAS diagnosis, when she was in her early teens. And I just happened to see this mom, and she said, "Oh, she's really struggling right now because she just had a physical, and there was all of these things, right? There's a problem with her thyroid." Problem with her blood pressure. She's overweight. Like there was probably like 5 or 6 things this mom listed off. And it made me think of what you had said in our group, that we're seeing these things in people with FASD. They're presenting much younger than in, the average population. And another thing with this young girl is, the parents have always had a really hard time when it came to food, because it was like there was no off switch. So that interoception, like not recognizing she's full. And so, they've been to the nutritionist and the dietitian and all of the counseling and the therapy and all of the things. And they're like, it's like because there's no off switch, it's so hard. It's like we try to keep hardly any snacks in the house. It's like they're policing the food, but when the kiddo is 18, right, it's harder to police the food. There's not an interest there the girl's not she's not ready to be like, I want to learn nutrition and take care of myself. But now at 18, all of these health conditions are presenting that are really you would expect to see in somebody much older. So I find it to be fascinating and eye-opening.
It is. And just anecdotally from my practice, from my personal experience in my practice, we don't see a lot of food neutral kids.
No.
We see a lot of kids that are either not terribly interested in food or incredibly interested in food. And that probably has to do with the disruption of the satiety signal from the gut to the brain. We often refer in medicine as the gut as the second brain. It controls a lot of things. It actually generates neurotransmitters and does a lot of the heavy lifting, and we just don't think of it that way. And then it can also be, so we have that they don't feel full or they don't feel hungry, and trying to navigate that. And then we have cause and effect, choice and consequence, and impulsivity a lot in the mix. Yes. My son has episodes of lightheadedness, passing out, getting really sick and vomiting, but cannot for the life of him make a connection to, well, I got lightheaded and I got dizzy when I ate chips for breakfast and didn't drink any water. Or maybe I threw up because I had somebody shared a bag of candy at lunch, and then I went to gym, and that probably wasn't a good idea. So we've got the kind of organic physiological things going on, and then the brain domain impairment that lets us override that. We all might have get lightheaded at 2:00 in the afternoon, and then, oh, phooey, I didn't eat lunch. That's why. Right. But if you don't have a good memory, you don't understand cause and effect, right, you're going to struggle with those things.
Yeah. So it's, again, it is so, so fascinating. Um, Dr. Jolly, what else? Any last thoughts on what parents, if they're listening to this and they're like, okay, you were just in my house, those are my kids you're describing, right? What should those parents do if FASD is new to them, their kiddo doesn't have a diagnosis, but this sounds like what could be going on?
First things first, I'm going to give you permission to acknowledge that it's hard. It feels heavy. It feels hard because it's hard. And in my completely unscientific analysis, because it's hard means you're a good parent.
Mhm.
Parents that aren't doing a great job never worry about how hard it is. They never worry about whether they're doing a good job, whether they're getting their kids what they need. The fact that you're listening to this podcast and you're trying to help your kids makes you a good parent, and you're doing a good job is the very first thing I would tell anybody. The second is, if you think FASD is in the mix, whether you know that alcohol was consumed, if you're a foster and adoptive parent and you don't know, there's a common misconception that lack of alcohol confirmation or confirmation of alcohol consumption precludes a diagnosis. It does not. You can be diagnosed with an FASD even if we're unsure about the alcohol consumption. So don't let that bit of information preclude you from seeking one. Start with your pediatrician and ask who they know, what they know. If they don't know anybody, try your nearest university medical system. Try them next. And if you're struggling there, FASD United, it's fasdunited.org, I think is their website. They have a family navigator program, and that's free to you, the user. You submit a form that says you need help. They connect you with someone that gives you every resource they are aware of in your area. They'll talk with you about everybody and their cousin that they know in your area. And then you find yourself a diagnosis. It can be a lot. Give yourself some grace through that process because it can be a lot of a lot. And your kid didn't change with a diagnosis. Your understanding of your kid's brain changed with the diagnosis. They're still the kid you love. They're still the kid that you're going to step in front of the bus for. You're just empowered now with some new tools and some new information to better support them through their life. That's all the diagnosis does, is give some clarity to what you're already living and give everybody some grace around the good things and the bad things. So, and if we can be of help in any way, first and foremost, I'm a foster and adoptive mom on this journey. I'm in the bumper car right next to you. So reach out and we'll share whatever we have available.
Yes, and we'll put your email and your website in our show notes, and we usually always include FASD United as well because my organization is an affiliate of FASD United, so highly recommend everybody go there. One quick thought, because I didn't ask this and you said something that made me think of it, and that is because a lot of times we hear that maternal admission, there has to be proof birth mom drank in order to get a diagnosis. Can you speak on that?
Certainly. Each individual practice, each individual diagnostician kind of has their own litmus test for what that confirmation is and what that confirmation can be. Some practices require an affidavit from mom about her alcohol consumption. Some don't require any documentation, verbal confirmation. I had a parent that comes forward and says, I had a conversation with grandma. I adopted my kids and grandma says mom drank. That's enough. And so it depends on the individual practitioner. And so if you're in a clinic where you don't have confirmation of alcohol consumption, but your kid meets every other diagnosis, but they're withholding an FASD diagnosis because of confirmation. And I know this is a great place of privilege, but I would say seek a different provider because that different provider is going to have a different take on how it works. And I'll tell you about my clinic. There's a lot of concern, or there's supposition within the community that we are maybe getting into some family dynamics and that different individuals might have different feelings about mom, and that might color what they have to say. Somebody's out to get mom. dad's mom never liked kids' bio mom, so we're got an axe to grind. That doesn't matter to me. That part of this dynamic isn't my job to figure out. If there is credible evidence that there is confirmation of alcohol consumption, I'm going to take it at face value and let the social workers, case managers, whoever else deal with that messy. Because in my clinic, my job is to serve my patient. Mm-hmm. I'm fully aware of all of the external, bigger picture FASD concerns and things, but my relationship and my obligation is to my patient. And it would be, to my mind, malpractice on my part not to take that information about confirmation and give it appropriate weight. Now, that's not to say that there have not been cases where it was obviously a personality conflict. There was something was afoot, and I take that into consideration. But my job is to take all the information from anywhere and say, this is what we know, because I'm a medical professional and I have you complete it like you do anywhere you go to a doctor or a nurse practitioner like myself. I'm going to have you fill out a medical history. Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask you who had what disease in your family. And you tell me that your grandfather died from heart disease. I'm going to take that at face value. I'm not going to ask for a copy of your grandfather's death certificate to confirm your medical history. Consumption is the child's medical history. And I'm going to take it at face value unless I have significant evidence that leads me to call it into question.
Wow, such wise words. Learning so much from you, Dr. Jolly. And I'm just so grateful to have you on. As we wrap up, would you leave us with some words of encouragement for our fellow foster and adoptive parents who are listening and on this journey with us?
I would say that I think as foster and adoptive parents, and particularly foster and adoptive parents of individuals with FASD, that we should take over the Army's old motto. It's the hardest job you'll ever love. Mm. It is the hardest job. By far, my kids with FASD are the most challenging children I've ever cared for, including my children with severe medical complexity, including my little guy who we thought was going to die last fall and is still here kicking. I can predict what my medically complex kids, I can predict what their challenges are going to be, and I can work to mitigate those. With FASD, it's the wild, wild west every day.
Yeah.
But I love it, and I love them, and I wouldn't be doing anything else. And not to get too religious or philosophical, my kids are my life's mission. It's what I was put here to do. And I didn't know for a long time what my life's mission was. I thought my life's mission was be a good person, do unto others, live a good life. But my calling is caring for my children that needed me to be their mom.
Yeah. That was your prayer, right?
That was my prayer. Yeah. And so, I mean, I think it's human nature. You can question the answered prayer. Is this really the one is this the answer? Are you sure? But it's taken me a long time. I didn't get there overnight. It's taken me a decade. I've been caring for these kids for a decade, more than a decade. I didn't get there overnight, but I got there. And on the really, really hard days when we're screaming, when my kiddo, my son can't have braces because he has hemophilia and a bleeding disorder, so he can't have the gum rawness so we have Invisalign. He had his Invisalign in for a day and a half before he accidentally threw them away. Mm-hmm. That's a hard day.
Yeah.
When the replacements are $400, that's a hard day.
Yeah.
But even on the hard days, I wouldn't give it up for anything.
Yeah. The hardest job you'll ever love.
The hardest job you'll ever love.
Love that. Ryan, thank you so much for all that you're doing on behalf of your own children and the incredible work that you are doing on behalf of children and families and the FASD community. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for the invite. I'm happy to be a small part in the effort.
And as always, thank you for listening to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey today. I hope you were inspired and encouraged by my conversation with Dr. Ryan Jolly. What a treat. What a treat. I learned so much as well. Be sure to visit her website, brainfirstfamilycenter.com. Scroll down to the show notes. You'll see a link to her website, a link to her email address will be in there if you want to contact her directly. And of course, FASD United, which we also discussed. They are the national organization on FASD. So you can find out what the resources are in your particular state where you are listening from. And if you suspect you are raising a child with FASD, or maybe you even know you are, we do have resources for your unique parenting journey. You heard about our Hope for the FASD online support group, Hope for the FASD Journey online support group. I also offer one-on-one parent coaching sessions if you want to really learn and kind of get a personalized approach of some strategies and accommodations that would work best for your kiddo, as well as online and in-person workshops. You can find all of those resources on my website, justicefororphansny.org. Just click Adoption and Foster Care Journey, AFCJ, and you'll be able to get right to those specific resources. I'm also thrilled to offer you my newest book as a resource, Soul Care Saturday, 52 Devotions for Foster and Adoptive Moms, now available on Amazon. I hope that you will check that out. The amazing Jamie Finn from Foster the Family wrote the foreword in the book. And it's a beautiful, beautiful book to look at with the illustrations on the inside, 52 weekly devotions, scriptures, breath prayers, journaling pages, and each devotion is written specifically from the perspective of an adopted mom for foster and adoptive moms. So I hope that you will check that out on Amazon. Again, that is Soul Care Saturday, 52 Devotions for Foster and Adoptive Moms. Please like and follow the Adoption and Foster Care Journey on Instagram and Facebook. Don't forget, we are also on YouTube. Every podcast in the video form is on the Justice for Orphans YouTube channel. So if you want to watch your podcast, you're welcome to do that there. Please subscribe to this podcast and leave a review. And as we come to the end, I just want to say I am so grateful that you spent your valuable time with me today. I'm thrilled to have you along for the journey.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, brought to you by Justice for Orphans. We hope you were encouraged today. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review, and share it with your fellow foster and adoptive parent friends so they can be encouraged too. Be sure to find and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Justice for Orphans. And check out our website for vital resources at justicefororphansny.org.